So, what is it that makes some teams not just good, but, exceptionally good? The kind that achieves way beyond expectations, like they pull off the impossible with this incredible cohesion and drive.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Every organization wants to know that secret sauce. Unlocking how high-performing teams really work, well, it offers some amazing insights into how they manage to go above and beyond.
And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're unpacking a whole stack of sources, but we're really leaning heavily on Daniel Coyle's book, The Culture Code. It's fascinating.
It really is.
We're aiming to reveal those maybe surprising secrets behind elite teams. We're talking Google's Project Aristotle findings, Coyle's own research with groups like the Navy SEALs, even Pixar.
Right, some real powerhouses.
Our mission today, to basically cut through the usual jargon and get to the practical stuff, the actual signals that make up this culture code.
And Coyle's core argument, which Google's research also backed up pretty strongly, is that it's not really who is on the team that matters most, it's how they interact.
How they interact.
Yeah, it's about well, he calls them living relationships they build to reach a common goal. And crucially, this isn't some abstract thing. It comes down to specific, repeatable signals.
Okay, so signals. He breaks it down, right, into three core cultural codes.
Exactly. Safety, cooperation, and self-organization. But these aren't just big ideas floating around. They're built from the ground up by three very specific kinds of signals: belonging signals, vulnerability signals, and purpose signals.
Belonging, vulnerability, purpose. Got it.
And this whole system, it creates these deep connections, which then translates into, effective high-performing action.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then, the foundation.
Precisely. Let's talk about safe. Right. But Coyle argues it's absolutely foundational. If you don't feel safe, you can't commit fully. And a lack of safety, it just creates this ripple effect. It leads to all sorts of cascading problems down the line.
Okay, so give us an example, something stark.
Well, for a really stark one, think about the Minuteman missile base in the U.S. These crews, they control Minuteman III missiles. We're talking incredibly destructive weapons, each one packing like 20 times the punch of the Hiroshima bomb.
Wow. So the stakes couldn't possibly be higher.
Exactly. The work is world-changing in its gravity. So you'd expect absolute perfection, right? Peak performance.
Definitely.
Yet for a period, they had some really disturbing issues.
Yeah.
Personnel caught doing illegal drugs, cheating on readiness tests.
Oh, wow. So the immediate reaction must have been...
Personal moral failings, right?
Yeah.
These were just bad apples. Leadership cracked down, implemented stricter checks. But guess what? It didn't really solve the underlying problem.
So what was going on?
This is where Coyle's research gets really interesting. He actually interviewed former missile crew members, and he found that outside the base, these were sharp, articulate, successful people. The surprising truth wasn't about personal character defects. It was a toxic team culture.
A toxic culture in that environment.
Yeah. It wasn't a lack of discipline. It was an environment that systematically, almost intentionally it seems, destroyed safety and cohesion.
Oh, what did that look like?
Well, think about it. Missile crews were split into these tiny two-person teams. They rotated 24-hour shifts in these cold, cramped underground silos, their only companions. Decades-old missiles.
Isolated.
Totally isolated, so inherently lacking social and emotional connection. Then, after the Cold War ended, their career path basically vanished. No promotions, no transfers possible.
So no social connection, no future prospects.
And then pile on constant high-pressure tests. Get this, some required memorizing launch codes from a binder that was 12 centimeters thick. Fail one of those tests, and your career was just over.
That sounds like an environment designed to breed fear, not safety.
Exactly. Fear and isolation. The total opposite of what you need for a high-performing team. In contrast, the really good teams operate completely differently. Members feel connected. They feel like they share a future. They feel secure.
They use that word family. Right.
Often, yeah.
Yeah.
They describe their teams as family. And their interaction patterns are different too. Like they tend to work in close proximity. There's a high volume of communication, lots of short exchanges, and remarkably, very few interruptions, which shows, high respect and attention.
Okay, so if safety is this critical foundation, how do we actually build it? It sounds good, but what's the practical side?
Coyle says it's all about transmitting belonging signals. These little cues that tell our brains, okay, you're safe here, you're part of the group.
Belonging signals? Like what?
There's a brilliant experiment he talks about, the rainy day phone experiment. Picture this. You're at a bus stop, it's pouring rain. Scenario 1. A stranger comes up and just asks very politely, "May I borrow your phone?" Scenario 2. Stranger comes up, gestures at the sky, and says, "Oh, this rain. Terrible, isn't it?" Say, may I borrow your phone?
Ah, okay, I think I see where this is going. That little shared complaint.
Exactly. A Harvard Business School professor, Brooks, ran this. And she found that in that second scenario, people were 422% more willing to lend their phone.
422% just from, ugh, this rain.
Isn't that incredible? That simple phrase, "ugh, this rain," acted as a belonging signal. It created this tiny instant moment of shared human connection. It signaled, hey, we're in this together. This interaction is safe.
Wow. Okay, I'm definitely going to complain about the weather more often now. But
Right.
why? Why does such a small thing make such a massive difference?
So it ties into our brain's sort of ancient wiring, specifically the amygdala. You can think of it as our brain's internal alert system.
The guard dog.
Yeah, exactly, the guard dog. When we meet new people or enter new situations, it's on high alert, constantly asking, am I safe here? Is this friend or foe?
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as it receives a belonging signal, even a tiny one like the rain comment, it starts to shift.
It calms down.
It sort of transforms from that barking guard dog into more of a helpful guide dog. It helps us navigate the social landscape, build bonds, track what our team members are doing, and basically prepares us for cooperation.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And Coyle stresses it's not just random signals, but targeted ones, right?
Yeah.
Especially at crucial moments.
Yes, exactly. Leveraging what he calls entry moments. Those first interactions, especially for new team members, are critical windows for sending these signals.
Like the Pixar example.
Pixar's onboarding is a fantastic example. On their very first day, everyone who's newly hired, doesn't matter if they're an animator, software engineer, or working in the cafe, they're all brought into a screening room, and they sit them in the 5th row, which is traditionally the director's seat. Then they hear this really powerful statement. No matter what your job was before, you are now a filmmaker. We need you to help us make better movies.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah, Coyle quotes an employee from data management who said that moment just completely reframed everything for them. Instant belonging, instant shared purpose.
It immediately shifts their whole identity and makes them feel part of something big. But one signal, even a powerful one like that, isn't enough for the long haul, is it? You need to keep that feeling going.
Absolutely not. Repetition is absolutely key. Our brains, you see, they don't process safety like a logical equation. It's more primal. It needs constant reinforcement.
So it's like keeping a fire going.
That's the analogy Coyle uses. Building safety is like maintaining a fire. It needs continuous fuel, a steady stream of those belonging signals to keep it burning strong.
Okay, that makes sense. So once a team has built that foundation of safety, everyone feels connected. How do they then get to that really smooth, high-level cooperation? This must be the second code.
Exactly. The second code, cooperation. And Coyle argues it's ignited by something maybe unexpected, vulnerability signals.
Vulnerability. Okay, most people think great teamwork just comes from finding people who naturally click, right? Like a comedy troupe that's perfectly rehearsed.
Yeah, that's the common assumption. Good chemistry, compatible personalities. But Coyle found something surprising. That deep cohesion, that real trust, it often grows out of interactions that are actually kind of awkward, maybe even a little painful.
Painful? How so?
Well, not painful in a bad way, but in the sense of exposing weakness. It means sharing your own weaknesses, admitting you don't know something, asking for help. That's a vulnerability signal.
But that feels so counterintuitive. Our instinct is usually to hide our weaknesses, project confidence. How does showing vulnerability actually boost cooperation?
It's a great question. There's a fantastic story from Gramercy Tavern, that busy, high-end restaurant in New York City. Imagine you're a new server, you've done 6 months of training, it's your first real shift. The assistant GM, Scott, comes over.
Okay, expecting a pep talk. You got this.
Right. But instead, Scott says something like, listen, your work today will likely not go smoothly.
Whoa! That's unexpected. What was the explanation?
That was the key bit. Scott followed up with, how do we know if your day went smoothly? If you ask for help 10 times, then we know you had a pleasant day. If you try to do everything yourself, it will be a disaster.
Ah, I see. So asking for help isn't weakness.
Exactly. It's reframed completely. Asking for help isn't a sign you're failing. It is the vulnerability signal. It's basically an invitation saying, hey, I need you. You have a role here. Let's connect. It opens the door for others to step in and help.
So it's not just about sending the signal like Scott did by being honest, but also how it's received and then maybe mirrored back.
Precisely. When one person shows vulnerability, and it's met not with judgment, but with support or even reciprocal vulnerability, that's when intimacy and trust really start to grow. Coyle calls this the vulnerability loop.
A loop.
Yeah, these small, repeated moments of shared vulnerability, they create this positive feedback loop that brings people closer, makes them more willing to tackle hard problems together. It fuels real cooperation.
But building that habit, being comfortable, being vulnerable, that must take practice. It doesn't just happen.
Oh, absolutely. It takes time, deliberate practice, like training a muscle you haven't used much.
Yeah.
And the Navy SEALs, again, offer a really powerful illustration of building this habit.
Their teamwork is legendary, obviously.
Right. And you might think their cohesion comes purely from, I don't know, super high-tech simulations or something. But a lot of their core training is surprisingly old school. Some of it dates back to the 1940s.
Like the log PT.
Exactly, log physical training. It sounds simple, almost primitive. 6 guys, one 200-pound, 3-meter log, carry it for 90 minutes. The movements themselves aren't complex.
But the challenge is immense, right? Because it forces interdependence.
Totally. Because if just one person struggles, even slightly, the entire team feels it instantly through the log. If the others only think of themselves, maybe try to shift the burden unfairly, the log starts rolling, becomes unstable, frustration builds, blame starts flying.
But if they react differently?
But if they respond unselfishly, instantly adjusting, redistributing the weight to help the struggling person, the log stays balanced. It moves smoothly. That incredibly raw physical training forces them over and over to share their momentary struggles, their vulnerability, and build that instant connected response. The log itself becomes like a real-time meter of their cooperation.
That's a really visceral example. And beyond the physical stuff, they also use those after-action reviews, the AARs.
Yes, the AARs are crucial. Coyle calls them truth-telling meetings. After every single mission, every training exercise, they sit down and explicitly discuss what went wrong, what mistakes were made.
Not to assign blame, though.
No, absolutely not for blame or even praise. The sole purpose is to learn and build a shared mental model. What happened? Why did it happen? What will we do differently next time? Everyone contributes.
So everyone's sharing their errors, their vulnerabilities in terms of knowledge gaps or misjudgments.
Exactly. A former SEAL named Cooper put it really well. He said something like, no single person knows everything, but by constantly sharing experiences, especially the errors, they build this kind of collective consciousness. It allows them to anticipate each other, react as one unit, and ultimately unleash the team's full potential.
Okay, so we have safety built on belonging signals, cooperation built on vulnerability signals. What's the third piece? How do teams stay aligned and moving towards a common goal once they have that safety and trust?
That brings us to the third code, self-organization, which is driven by purpose signals.
Purpose. Okay, lots of organizations have mission statements, values on the wall, slogans.
Right. IDEO has less talk, more do. Pixar has art challenges technology, technology inspires art. And often, let's be honest, these can feel a bit like empty PR. Just words.
Yeah, you see them on the website, but does it mean anything day to day?
But here's what Coyle found in the really successful teams he studied. Those slogans, those core values, those inspiring stories, they weren't just on a plaque. They were constantly repeated, woven into everyday conversations, used to make decisions, referenced all the time.
So repetition again. Why is that constant repetition of purpose so important?
Well, think about another amazing natural phenomenon. A starling murmuration. You've seen those huge flocks of birds.
Oh, yeah, thousands of them moving like one single fluid cloud. It's mesmerizing.
Totally mesmerizing. And for ages, people genuinely thought it must be some kind of telepathy. How else could they be so perfectly synchronized?
It does look like mind reading.
But then, in 2007, physicists actually figured it out. It's not telepathy at all. It's simply that each bird is constantly paying close attention to just a few small signals from its nearest 6 or 7 neighbors. Things like direction, speed, acceleration, distance.
Just those local signals.
Just those small, constant local signals. Paying attention to those allows the entire flock to react almost instantly and move as this incredibly cohesive, self-organizing whole.
Okay, so Coyle is saying successful teams are like starlings.
In a way, yes. They build what he calls high-purpose environments. These are environments just filled with crucial purpose signals, like the starling's flight cues.
And these signals, when they're repeated over and over,
They do a few key things. They focus everyone's attention. They connect what people are doing right now to some larger future ideal. They make it really clear constantly, here's where we are and here's where we want to go. And that clarity, that constant navigation leads to that kind of spontaneous collector action you see in great teams.
So how do you actually build one of these high-purpose environments? Does it look different depending on the team's goal?
Yeah, Coyle makes a distinction. It depends if you're an execution-oriented organization, clear goals, repeatable tasks, or a creative-oriented one where the goal is innovation, finding new answers.
Okay, let's take an execution example first.
He uses a really surprising one, managing football hooligans during the Euro 2004 tournament in Portugal.
Football hooligans, that sounds like the opposite of purpose and cooperation.
Right. The challenge was immense. Thousands of British fans were expected, many with a known history of violence. Previous tournaments had seen over 1,000 arrests just for football violence.
So Portugal must have been planning a massive police presence, riot gear.
That was the initial plan. Yeah, they budgeted something like $21 million just for riot control. But then they brought in this social psychologist, Clifford Stott. Stott looked at the data and noticed something interesting. 95% of the people arrested for football violence actually had no prior criminal record.
So not necessarily hardcore criminals causing all the trouble.
Exactly. So Stott proposed this completely counterintuitive approach. It's basically, stop trying to control the riots using traditional heavy-handed methods.
Stop controlling riots.
Yeah.
How?
Well, instead of lines of police and intimidating riot gear, he had them deploy friendly liaison officers. They wore light blue vests, no helmets, and were specifically trained to just chat with fans about football, about gossip, anything but crowd control.
Just be normal humans.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And he even changed how police responded to a common hooligan tactic, kicking a football high into the street to try and provoke a confrontation. Instead of rushing in immediately, police were told to just wait for the ball to come near them, then calmly confiscate it. The idea was to avoid that cycle of violence begetting violence.
Did it work?
The results were stunning. In the areas where they used Stott's methods, there was only one arrest during the entire tournament period. One. But in the areas where police stuck to the traditional helmet and shield tactics, violence flared up just like usual.
Incredible. So Stott's approach, the vests, the chatty officers waiting for the ball, those are the purpose signals.
Yes. Collectively, all those small actions sent a constant, subtle signal. We are here to get along. This is about football, not fighting. These repeated, low-key signals created that high-purpose environment that gently steered people towards the shared goal of enjoying the game, rather than escalating conflict.
Okay, that is a fascinating execution example. What about the creative side? Organizations needing innovation.
Right, for creative organizations, the challenge is different. Coyle points out a common mistake, focusing too much on finding brilliant ideas instead of building brilliant teams. When you do that and an idea inevitably fails, you often just churn through people looking for the next genius idea.
Instead of developing the team's ability to generate and refine ideas together.
Exactly. Ed Catmull, the co-founder of Pixar, had a very different philosophy. He fundamentally believed that failure is just an inevitable part of creative work. You can't avoid it.
So the goal isn't instant brilliance.
No. For Catmull, the goal was, as he put it, to sift through many ideas to find the right choice. It's a process of exploration and refinement, which requires a strong team. His core belief was famous. Give a good idea to a mediocre team, they'll mess it up. Give a mediocre idea to a good team, they'll make it great.
The focus has to be on the team itself.
Absolutely. And you really saw this play out when Disney acquired Pixar back in 2006. At the time, Disney animation had been in a creative slump for about a decade. Lots of misses.
Right, I remember that period.
Yet, under Catmull's leadership, using his Pixar philosophies, Disney Animation started producing massive hits. Again, things like Frozen, Zootopia, and here's the kicker. They did it with almost no staff changes.
Wow. So he really did turn a mediocre team, or at least a struggling one, into a great one. How did he build that high creative environment?
He did several key things. He made physical changes, like bringing the creative and technical staff closer together physically to encourage interaction. He shifted power dynamics. Directors got more creative control. Executives became more like supporters and mentors rather than top-down decision makers.
And his personal style.
Catmull himself had a very specific style. He'd apparently just roam the offices, observing how teams were interacting. He worried if he saw awkward silence, seeing it as a sign of blocked communication. And crucially, he actively defended teams when they made mistakes, reinforcing that failure was part of the process.
So he was like the environment builder.
Coyle describes him beautifully as being like a ship's engineer. His focus wasn't on steering the ship himself, but on making sure the engines were running smoothly, supporting the team, allowing for failure, providing the tools and the fuel they needed to find their own way.
So let's try and pull this all together then, our deep dive into the culture code. It really comes back to these three fundamental codes, doesn't it? Safety, cooperation, and self-organization.
That's right. And they aren't just abstract ideas. They're actively built, woven together by the constant, deliberate use of those three types of signals. Belonging signals create the safety,
Vulnerability signals spark the cooperation.
and purpose signals guide the self-organization and alignment. These signals are like the threads that create those really strong team cultures.
And the one thing that seems to run through all three is repetition.
Absolutely. That's maybe the most crucial takeaway. Whether you're talking about belonging, vulnerability, or purpose signals, their real power comes from their repeated application, day in, day out.
It might feel tedious sometimes, maybe even a bit redundant.
It might. But as Coyle emphasizes, it's actually a surprisingly reliable management technique because, again, our brains don't process these critical social cues like a spreadsheet. They need that constant reinforcement to really internalize the message. You belong here. It's safe to be open here. This is what we're aiming for together.
That's such a key point. So the real value of repeating these signals isn't just the specific information in the signal itself.
No, it's more about how that repetition consistently directs the team's attention. It keeps pulling their focus back to each other, back to their shared purpose, and back to the path forward.
Like Coyle says, it looks like repetition, but it's navigation.
Exactly. It's navigating the complexities of human interaction to build something truly effective together.
So maybe the final thought for you listening is this. How could you start navigating your own team or even your own relationships by consciously and repeatedly using some of these small but incredibly powerful signals? Belonging, vulnerability, purpose, it really makes you think.